The complicated truth about the royal family's reaction to Princess Diana's death. Buckingham Palace is 325 years old and has its share of ghosts. But the even older Kensington Palace remains imbued with the still palpable spirit of one of the most famous figures of the 20th century, and that essence will linger so long as the sons of the late Princess of Wales continue to make their mother's former home their own, or for so long as there are people around to remember her, to contribute pieces to the not altogether solved puzzle that is her story. It's been 21 years since Princess Diana was killed in a car crash at only 36 years old, leaving behind a complex legacy that represents different things to different members of a family that had no choice but to carry on and put up a strong front in her wake. To many, any reservation of feeling was seen as disrespectful, an affront to Diana, who in life was dubbed the People's Princess because of the effortless way she connected with a country that often found the royals lacking in substance and relatability, even as she struggled to find solid footing in the family she had married into and then, in their eyes, crossed in myriad ways. At the time, the Queen's unemotional, or at least inadequately emotional, behavior in the days immediately following Diana's death was one of the rare charges against the monarch that actually stuck in the court of public opinion. There has always been a faction that's fed up with the royals, and the family will forever have its critics, but that time in 1997 remains one of Queen Elizabeth II's few serious fumbles in the 66 years she's been on the throne. "Show us you care," screamed one of the tabloid headlines. But while domestic morale is her stock in trade, the Queen did have more important things to think about right away when her private secretary called her at Balmoral Castle in Scotland in the middle of the night to inform her about the crash in Paris. The Queen was in such disbelief that she mused out loud, "Someone must have greased the brakes," royal biographer Ingrid Seward reported in her 2015 book The Queen's Speech, an intimate portrait of the Queen in her own words. Diana was pronounced dead at 3 a.m. British Standard Time, on August 31, 1997. Prince Charles, also at Balmoral with sons Prince William and Prince Harry, was first in the household to hear, from the British ambassador, that his ex-wife had died. He was absolutely distraught. He fell apart, Tina Brown, author of the Diana Chronicles, said in the 2017 TV documentary Diana, 7 Days That Shook the Windsors. He knew, instantly, that this was going to be a terrible thing, that he will be blamed, that they will be blamed, for the death of Diana. They, meaning the royal family. The National Grid reported a record power surge, caused by the turning on of televisions and, simultaneously, electric kettles, to make consolatory cups of tea. Broadcasters played the British national anthem every hour. And almost immediately, the waiting began for the royal family to release a statement, as well as their surely imminent return to Buckingham Palace. But Scotland was where the Queen remained, with Diana's sons, while London erupted in grief. British Prime Minister Tony Blair addressed reporters that morning from his home constituency in County Durham, saying he was utterly devastated, like the rest of the country. "Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys," he said, clasping and unclasping his hands together in front of him. "Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation, in Britain, in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us." Blair paused. "She was a wonderful, and a warm, human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others, in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times should we remember her, in how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with the children, with the needy, when with just a look, or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time, I'm sure we could only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her, they regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain, in our hearts and in our memories, forever." In hindsight, it was a surprisingly emotional and personal public display from the leader of a nation that, as astutely or comically pointed out by many Brits themselves, isn't known for its outward warmth. Blair had only been Prime Minister for 4 months, and all eyes were on how he would handle his first major crisis. Behind the walls at Balmoral, meanwhile, Charles and the Queen chose not to break the news to William and Harry until they woke up in the morning. Charles, who was almost 13 years Diana's senior and who had only been alone with her a handful of times when they married on July 29, 1981, was caught in a precarious predicament when it came to mourning the death of his ex-wife. They had been officially separated since 1992, the Queen's Annus Horribilis, and their divorce had just been finalized in 1996. In the process, Diana remained the Princess of Wales, but was no longer Her Royal Highness. She maintained her residence at Kensington Palace and access to the royal airplane and rooms at St. James's Palace for entertaining, while Charles resided primarily at Highgrove, his Gloucester estate. They agreed on equal access to the children. Meanwhile, Charles immediately wanted to take the royal aircraft to Paris to claim Diana's body. The Queen initially said no. According to Diana, 7 days that shook the Windsors, Charles convinced her it was the right thing to do. Harry wanted to go with him, but his father didn't think the 12-year-old should have to bear the ordeal. One of the hardest things for a parent to have to do is tell your children that your other parent has died. How you deal with that, I don't know, Prince Harry reflected in the 2017 BBC documentary Diana, 7 Days, another of the numerous specials and retrospectives that marked the 20th anniversary of Diana's death last year, but one of few made with the cooperation of her immediate family. But he was there for us. He was the one out of 2 left. And he tried to do his best and to make sure that we were protected and looked after. But he was going through the same grieving process as well. Harry and William accompanied the Queen to church that Sunday morning, as routine dictated, and under the royal family's direction there was no mention of Diana during the service. Charles went to Paris with Diana's sisters, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Baroness Jane Fellows. On their way back to the airport, following the hearse carrying Diana's casket, Charles reportedly said in the car to the British ambassador, "It all seems unreal. Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death." Queen Elizabeth II, dressed in black, said in a national address from Buckingham Palace, "We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings, disbelief, incomprehension, anger and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart." The royal continued, "First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her, for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her, but felt they knew her, will remember her. Her demeanor could best be described as composed, not stiff, not too formal, just composed." In The Queen, Prime Minister Tony Blair, played by Michael Sheen, calls the Queen at Balmoral and asks her if she doesn't think that an immediate return to London would be in the people's best interest. "I doubt there is anyone who knows the British people more than I do, Mr. Blair, nor who has greater faith in their wisdom and judgment," Mirren's Queen replies, "and it is my belief that they will any moment reject this mood, which is being stirred up by the press, in favor of a period of restrained grief, and sober, private mourning. That's the way we do things in this country, quietly, with dignity. That's what the rest of the world has always admired us for." Count just how wrong the Queen was on that occasion as another way in which Diana forever changed what it meant to be a royal.